Sophia Loren, war-torn Italy, 1934. A baby girl named Sofia Villani Ciccolone is born in Rome, but she grows up in the rough streets of Pozzuoli, a Naples suburb struggling with poverty. As a lanky teenager, she earns the nickname the Toothpick, a cruel jab at her thin frame. But Sofia has something more powerful than stature: presence. At 16, she enters the 1950 Miss Italia pageant under a stage name, Sofia Lazzaro. Some say it was a nod to the biblical Lazarus, because, as legend has it, her beauty could raise the dead. Though she doesn't win, she catches the attention of Carlo Ponti, a film producer more than 20 years her senior. He sees something in her, a spark Hollywood might just fall for. But first, she needs a name that sounds international, something unforgettable. Ponti, inspired by Swedish actress Marta Torén, starts playing with sounds: Torin, Soren, Loren, and with one final tweak, changing the F in Sophia to PH. Sophia Loren is born. The transformation isn't just about phonetics. In an era when foreign stars had to mold themselves into Hollywood's rigid standards, a name could mean the difference between obscurity and stardom. But even with her new identity, Loren refuses to bow to every demand. Executives suggest she refine her nose to fit the era's beauty ideals. Even Ponti nudges her towards surgery. But Loren stands firm. "I like my face," she declares. "If I have to change my nose, I'm going back to Pozzuoli." She keeps her features untouched. And in 1960, she makes history. Her raw, gut-wrenching performance in Two Women earns her an Academy Award, making her the first actor to win an Oscar for a foreign-language film. Through it all, she stays true to her roots. She plays strong, passionate Italian women on screen because that's who she is. And the name? Sophia Loren isn't just a stage name, it's a legend. Rita Hayworth. She was born Margherita Carmen Cancino, but Hollywood had other plans. In the late 1930s, Columbia Pictures' powerful head Harry Cohn saw potential in the young actress, but not with that name. It was too ethnic, too foreign for an industry obsessed with all-American appeal. So, under studio pressure, she became Rita Hayworth, borrowing her mother's maiden name to sound more palatable to mainstream audiences. But a name change wasn't enough. Cohn demanded a complete reinvention. Her naturally dark hair, dyed a striking shade of red. Her distinctive low hairline, altered through electrolysis, a painful process that involves zapping hair follicles to create what the studio deemed a more glamorous look. While some sources suggest the procedure was primarily for hair removal, others speculate it subtly reshaped her appearance. Either way, it was excruciating. By the 1940s, Rita Hayworth wasn't just a star, she was a Hollywood goddess. When she peeled off that satin glove in Gilda in 1946, she didn't just captivate audiences. She became an icon of desire. But the transformation came at a cost. Years later, she reportedly lamented, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." Whether she actually said it or not, the sentiment rang true. Rita Hayworth was a fantasy, carefully crafted by the studio system. And Margherita Cancino? She had been left behind. Judy Garland. Frances Gumm wasn't a name built for Hollywood. At least that's what MGM executives believed when they signed a 13-year-old girl with a voice that could shake the rafters. Frances Gumm sounded too ordinary, too clunky, hardly the name of a future icon. But Judy Garland? That had a ring to it. The name change wasn't even her idea. Some say it was vaudeville entertainer George Jessel who suggested Garland, possibly borrowing it from a fellow performer. Others argue it was inspired by film critic Robert Garland. And the first name? Many point to Hoagy Carmichael's 1934 song, Judy, though some suspect the studio simply plucked it from thin air. Whatever the truth, by 1934, Frances Gumm was history. The transformation worked. Just a few years later, Garland was cast as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, and her rendition of Over the Rainbow cemented her as a legend. But the studio didn't just change her name, it controlled nearly every aspect of her life. MGM dictated her diet, pushed her through grueling work schedules, and allegedly provided amphetamines to keep her energy up. By her 20s, she was already battling substance-related struggles that would haunt her for decades. Her name may have been a studio invention, but Judy Garland became more than just a brand. She was a force of nature, fighting for her place in an industry that tried to mold her into something else. Rock Hudson. Roy Harold Scherer Jr. wasn't the name of a Hollywood heartthrob. It was the name of a Midwestern kid with a dream and a face made for the silver screen. But in 1948, when talent agent Henry Wilson took him under his wing, that name had to go. Wilson, infamous for crafting leading men from scratch, believed Roy Scherer was too ordinary, too forgettable. So he built a name that radiated strength, Rock Hudson. Rock, some say, was inspired by the Rock of Gibraltar, a symbol of endurance. Hudson was supposedly a nod to the mighty Hudson River. The transformation was complete, but Hudson reportedly hated it. Biographers note that he found the name artificial, though it stuck, along with the image of the towering, square-jawed matinee idol. By the 1950s, he was one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, headlining films like Giant alongside Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean. But behind the chiseled facade was a man forced to live a double life. Hollywood's rigid morality code meant Hudson's personal truth had to remain hidden. Wilson, known for fiercely protecting his clients, reportedly went to great lengths to keep Hudson's private life out of the tabloids. Some claim he even bartered secrets about other stars to shield him. Whether true or not, the public only saw Rock Hudson, the ultimate symbol of masculinity. The man behind the name? That story would take decades to fully emerge. Joan Crawford. Hollywood in the 1920s was a place where identities were rewritten overnight, and few transformations were as calculated as that of Lucille Fay Lesueur. When MGM took her under contract in 1925, including publicity chief Pete Smith, decided her name needed a makeover. They feared Lesueur sounded too much like sewer, an association they wanted to avoid, so they orchestrated a rebranding campaign, reportedly soliciting name suggestions from the public, though the final choice was made behind closed doors. The winner? Joan Crawford. Crawford supposedly despised her new name, thinking it sounded harsh and artificial, but in Hollywood, personal preferences didn't matter, marketability did. Under this new identity, she became one of MGM's most bankable stars of the 1930s, dazzling audiences with her striking looks and magnetic screen presence. By the 1940s, she had shed her flapper-era image to reinvent herself as a dramatic powerhouse, culminating in her Academy Award win from Mildred Pierce in 1946. But Crawford's name change wasn't just about phonetics, it was about control. The studio system molded actors into idealized versions of themselves, erasing any trace of a past that didn't fit the Hollywood dream. Some whisper that Crawford, who grew up in poverty, embraced the transformation so fully that she spent her life distancing herself from her working-class roots, even allegedly fabricating details about her upbringing. Whether true or not, one thing is certain. Joan Crawford wasn't just a name. It was a carefully crafted persona, one she maintained until the very end. Cary Grant. A young Archibald Alec Leach stepped off the boat from England with a dream, but Hollywood had one problem: his name. Archibald sounded too stiff, too British, too forgettable. Paramount Pictures wanted a leading man with charm, mystery, and an air of sophistication. And so, in 1932, Archie Leach vanished, and Cary Grant was born. The name Cary wasn't random. It came from a stage role he had played, Cary Lockwood, a character who already embodied the suave confidence he aspired to. Grant wasn't his idea either. Paramount handed him a list of options, carefully curated to sound strong, all-American, and bankable. Some say Grant was chosen to echo the success of another Hollywood icon, Gary Cooper. Whatever the reason, it worked. Cary Grant became the epitome of charm, starring in classics like North by Northwest and To Catch a Thief. But was he ever truly Cary Grant? Even he wasn't sure. Everybody would like to be Cary Grant. So would I, he once quipped. Behind the polished persona was a man shaped by hardship. Born in 1904 in Bristol, England, Grant's childhood was marked by loss. His mother was placed in an institution when he was just 9, a fact his father kept hidden from him for decades. At 14, desperate for escape, he forged his father's signature to join a traveling comedy troupe, leaving behind the boy he was to become the man Hollywood needed. Some whisper that Grant's reinvention was more than just a stage name. It was a shield, a way to bury the pain of his past and step into a role that felt safer than reality. Did he ever stop being Archie Leach? Or was Cary Grant just the most convincing performance of his life? Tony Curtis. Bernard Schwartz knew Hollywood had no room for a name like his. Born in 1925 to Hungarian Jewish immigrants in the Bronx, he grew up speaking Hungarian before he even learned English. His father's tailoring business barely scraped by, and discrimination was a daily reality. But when Schwartz set his sights on stardom, he faced one more hurdle: his name. Universal Studios executives took one look and decided it had to go. Too ethnic, too forgettable, too hard to sell. So Bernard Schwartz became Tony Curtis. Tony had a youthful charm, and Curtis, some say, came from the novel Anthony Adverse, though whispers suggest it was also a nod to his mother's family name, Kurtz. The transformation worked. Almost overnight, Curtis went from bit parts to leading roles, sharing the screen with legends like Marilyn Monroe and Some Like It Hot. But Curtis later admitted the name change came at a cost. "I was 1,000,000 to 1 shot," he once said. "The least likely to succeed. I wasn't low man on the totem pole. I was under the totem pole in a sewer, tied to a sack." He wasn't alone. Hollywood in the mid-20th century was ruthless with identity. Studios erased ethnic names, reshaped accents, and molded stars into marketable ideals. Curtis played the game, but the question lingered. Did it make him a star, or did it make him a stranger to himself? Boris Karloff. William Henry Pratt was born into a distinguished British family in the late 1800s, with his father serving as a diplomat, but a career in horror didn't exactly align with aristocratic expectations. So when Pratt pursued acting, he shed his proper English name for something with a bit more bite: Boris Karloff. The name sounded exotic, mysterious, and unforgettable. Where did it come from? That's still up for debate. Karloff once suggested Karloff was a distant family name from his mother's side, but there's no evidence to back that up. Some historians whisper that he simply made it up, crafting an identity that felt larger than life. Whatever the truth, the transformation worked. By the time he donned the bolts and heavy boots of Frankenstein's monster in 1931, Boris Karloff was more than a stage name. It was a legend in the making. Off-screen, Karloff was the opposite of his eerie persona. He was known for his gentle nature, even staying in character through grueling makeup sessions without complaint. Director James Whale admired his quiet discipline, crediting Karloff with bringing unexpected soul to the monster, and he never dropped the name. Not in Hollywood, not at home. Even his daughter, Sarah Karloff, carries the surname to this day. In the end, Boris Karloff wasn't just a name change. It was a reinvention so complete that William Henry Pratt, the diplomat's son, faded into history, while his monstrous alter ego became immortal. Lauren Bacall. Hollywood has always been a land of reinvention, but few transformations were as deliberate or as striking as Betty Joan Persky's. In 1943, a 19-year-old Persky caught the eye of legendary director Howard Hawks. He saw star potential but believed her name lacked the sophistication and mystique needed for Hollywood's elite. So, under his guidance, she became Lauren Bacall. The origins of Bacall remain debated. Some say it was inspired by a literary character, while others believe Hawks simply thought it sounded elegant. What's certain is that Bacall was more than a name. It was a persona. Hawks meticulously shaped her image, even training her to lower her voice into that signature husky tone. When she made her screen debut in To Have and Have Not in 1944, opposite Humphrey Bogart, the transformation was complete. The chemistry was electric, and the world was introduced to a new kind of femme fatale, cool, confident, and utterly unforgettable. But beneath the glamour, there was another unspoken reality. Many Jewish actors of the era, including Bacall, who was born to Jewish parents, faced pressure to adopt less ethnic names to fit Hollywood's rigid beauty standards. Studios often encouraged reinvention, sometimes fabricating entire backstories to make stars more palatable to mainstream audiences. Bacall, however, never abandoned her heritage. In her memoir, By Myself, she reflected, "I felt totally Jewish, and always would." Her name changed, her voice deepened, but her identity remained her own, a delicate balance between reinvention and authenticity. Dean Martin. Imagine stepping onto a dimly lit stage in the 1940s, crooning to a smoky room of half-listening patrons. That was the reality for Dino Paul Cracetti, until a local DJ named Sonny King suggested a change. Dino Martini had a nice ring, but it still carried an unmistakable Italian flair. So with one final tweak, Dean Martin was born. It wasn't just a name, it was a ticket to Hollywood. Studios had a habit of reshaping identities to fit their mold, and Martin wasn't alone. Ishur Danielovich became Kirk Douglas. Margarita Cancino? She transformed into Rita Hayworth. The industry had a formula: Americanize, simplify, sell. But here's the twist. While Hollywood tried to sand down his ethnic edges, it was Martin's effortless charm, his old-world swagger that made him a legend. Even as he played the all-American crooner, he never truly abandoned his roots. He slipped into Italian mid-song, carried himself with a knowing wink, and brought a touch of his heritage to the Rat Pack's effortless cool. Some say the name change was a necessity, a survival move in an industry that wasn't ready for a Dino Crocetti. But in the end, it wasn't the name that made him a star, it was the man behind it. John Wayne. It's 1929 and a young actor named Marion Morrison is about to land his first major role in The Big Trail. But there's a problem. His name. Fox executives think Marion sounds too soft for a rugged Western hero. Director Raoul Walsh steps in with a suggestion. Wayne, inspired by Revolutionary War General Mad Anthony Wayne. As for John, most accounts credit Walsh, who may have simply liked the way it sounded. Some speculate studio head Winfield Sheehan had a hand in approving it, but the exact reason remains unclear. Either way, the transformation was complete. Marion Morrison vanished, and John Wayne was born. But here's where it gets interesting. Wayne himself later admitted that John Wayne wasn't just a name, it was a persona, one he had to embody both on and off screen. The tough-as-nails cowboy, the fearless war hero, that wasn't really him, it was an image he carefully maintained. To mark the change, Walsh gifted him a carved bone knife with John Wayne etched into it, a symbolic farewell to his old identity. Yet despite Hollywood's efforts to mold him into the ultimate American icon, Wayne never fully let go of his past. Close friends still called him Duke, a childhood nickname that stuck, thanks to his family's loyal Airedale Terrier. And while audiences saw him as the embodiment of frontier toughness, those who knew him best saw the man behind the legend, one who never quite left Marion Morrison behind. Doris Day. Doris Marianne Kappelhoff had the voice, the charm, and the talent, but her name, not exactly marquee material. Enter Barney Rapp, her bandleader in Les Brown's orchestra, who decided Kappelhoff was a mouthful. Inspired by her signature tune, Day After Day, he suggested something snappier, Doris Day. And just like that, a star was born. But behind the sunny, all-American image, her life was anything but picture-perfect. Her first husband, Al Jordan, was reportedly abusive, a nightmare that ended in divorce. Then came Martin Melcher, her third husband, who not only controlled her career but also left her in financial ruin, though the real culprit was his business partner, whose mismanagement surfaced only after Melcher's death. Some whisper that Melcher kept her in the dark about their crumbling finances, knowing she'd never question him. True or not, Doris Day's name remained untarnished, a Hollywood illusion of effortless grace masking the storms behind the scenes. Fred Astaire. Imagine trying to make it big in Hollywood with a last name that sounds like a battlefield. That was the challenge for Frederick Austerlitz, a gifted dancer born in 1899 to Austrian and German immigrant parents. While his talent was undeniable, Austerlitz didn't exactly roll off the tongue, or fit the glamorous image studios wanted. Enter the name Astaire. Some say it was inspired by a distant family connection, while others believe it was a polished reinvention, possibly influenced by an uncle who went by Lestaire. Either way, it worked. Fred and his sister Adele became a sensation in vaudeville, their new name helping them climb the ranks. But when Adele retired in 1932, Fred had to start fresh, this time in Hollywood. His big break in Flying Down to Rio in 1933 proved he could shine solo, and by the time Top Hat and Swing Time hit the screen, the name Astaire was synonymous with effortless grace. But despite his sleek new identity, Fred never forgot his roots. Though he was raised in an English-speaking household, he reportedly understood German well enough to hold conversations, though some question whether he was truly fluent. One thing's for sure, Hollywood's obsession with reinvention wasn't just about branding. For stars like Fred Astaire, the right name wasn't just a career move, it was survival. Greta Garbo. Picture this. You're a young actress in Sweden, barely 20, when one of the country's most powerful directors tells you your name, your very identity, won't cut it on the world stage. That's exactly what happened to Greta Lovisa Gustafsson. Director Maurits Stiller didn't just refine her acting. He reshaped her entire persona. He insisted she take on a name that was more enigmatic, more international, more star-worthy. And so Greta Garbo was born. But here's the mystery. Where did Garbo come from? Some whisper that it was inspired by the Italian word gabbro, a type of dark, rugged rock symbolizing strength and mystery. Others suggest Stiller plucked it from thin air, a name designed to roll off the tongue like a secret. Garbo herself never explained, only deepening the intrigue that surrounded her. By the mid-1920s, she had already made waves in Swedish cinema, but Hollywood came calling in 1926 with The Torrent, her first American film. Almost overnight, her face, those sculpted cheekbones, those haunting eyes, became synonymous with old Hollywood glamour. But just as she had transformed once, she did it again, this time by vanishing. At the peak of her stardom in 1941, Garbo walked away. No farewell tour, no dramatic exit, just silence. She famously turned down roles in Casablanca and Sunset Boulevard, choosing instead a life of near-total seclusion in New York City. Paparazzi would catch fleeting glimpses of her, but she never returned to the screen. Her name, her career, her disappearance, it was all part of the enigma that made Greta Garbo one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. Yul Brynner. Hollywood in the 1950s was packed with leading men, but none quite like Yul Brynner. With his piercing stare and unmistakable bald head, he was a mystery wrapped in charisma. Born Yuli Borisovich Brynner in Vladivostok, Russia in 1920, his journey to stardom was anything but ordinary. After his father left the family, his mother whisked him away to China and later Paris, where he dabbled in music and radio. But when Hollywood came calling, he knew his name, thick with Russian syllables, needed a makeover. Yul Brynner was born, a name as sharp and commanding as his presence. Then came the real stroke of genius, the bald head. Cast as King Mongkut in The King and I in 1951, he shaved his head for the role. It was meant to be temporary, but the look was so striking, so unlike the carefully coiffed stars of the era that he kept it. By 1956, he had won an Academy Award, cementing his place in Hollywood history. Yet Brynner never fully let go of his Russian roots, nor did he shy away from embellishing them. He often spoke of his ancestry, sometimes claiming Mongolian heritage, though historians debate the accuracy. He even fudged his birth year, adding to the enigma. But that was the magic of Yul Brynner. He wasn't just a man, he was a legend of his own making. Jean Arthur. Picture this, a young actress struggling to make a name for herself in the silent film era, burdened with the rather unremarkable name Gladys Georgiana Green. Hollywood demanded something more, something memorable. So she became Jean Arthur, a name she reportedly took inspiration for from Joan of Arc, Jeanne d'Arc, a figure she admired for her strength and conviction. And it worked. But her reinvention didn't stop there. When the industry transitioned to sound, Arthur nearly abandoned acting entirely after hearing her own husky, slightly raspy voice on a sound test. Some claim she recoiled in horror, allegedly calling it a foghorn. But instead of ending her career, that distinctive voice became her signature, setting her apart in the golden age of screwball comedy. By the 1930s, Jean Arthur was Hollywood royalty, starring in classics like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and The More the Merrier. But behind the scenes, she was one of Hollywood's most reluctant stars. Stage fright plagued her so severely that she often fled to her dressing room between takes, sometimes physically ill from anxiety. Even her frequent co-star Gary Cooper had to coax her through scenes, his calm demeanor helping to steady her nerves. Then in the mid-1940s, at the peak of her career, she walked away from Hollywood. Some say she was exhausted by the pressures of fame. Others speculate she had grown disillusioned with the relentless demands of the studio system. Whatever the reason, she left Columbia Pictures behind and rarely looked back. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Jean Arthur didn't chase the spotlight after Hollywood. Instead, she found fulfillment elsewhere, teaching drama at Vassar College and living a quiet life away from the cameras. Her transformation wasn't just about a name change, it was about crafting an identity that allowed her to thrive in an industry that demanded constant reinvention. And yet, even after stepping away, her legacy as one of the greatest screwball comedy stars remains unshaken. Vincent Price. Vincent Leonard Price Jr. had the name of a businessman, not a Hollywood legend. And that was the problem. His father, Vincent Leonard Price Sr., was a successful entrepreneur, running a vinegar company that later merged into the National Candy Company. To avoid confusion, and perhaps to carve out an identity of his own, Price quietly dropped the Jr. A small change, but one that gave his name a timeless, aristocratic air, perfect for the elegant menace he would bring to the screen. His career didn't start in horror. In the 1930s and 40s, Price played everything from charming leads to sinister villains in noir and historical dramas. But by the 1950s, Hollywood had found his true calling. His deep, velvety voice and towering presence made him a natural for gothic horror. House of Wax 1953 and The Fly 1958 cemented his reputation, and by the early 1960s, his collaborations with Roger Corman on Edgar Allan Poe adaptations made him horror royalty. Yet off-screen, Price was nothing like the eerie figures he portrayed. He was a devoted art collector, a published cookbook author, and even hosted a cooking show. Some say he delighted in the contrast, knowingly feeding the public's fascination with his dual identity. Whether intentional or not, his carefully curated persona, right down to the name, ensured that Vincent Price would forever be synonymous with the golden age of horror. Claudette Colbert. Imagine stepping off a boat in 1910, a young French girl in a foreign land, barely speaking the language. That was Émilie Chauchoin's reality when she and her family arrived in New York. But by the time she became a Hollywood star, Émilie was gone, replaced by Claudette Colbert, a name that oozed sophistication and American charm. Her transformation wasn't just about reinvention, it was survival. Studios had a clear preference for names that sounded elegant, easy to pronounce, and most importantly, marketable. Claudette wasn't plucked from childhood. It was a deliberate choice, a name that carried a refined continental allure. And Colbert? That came straight from her father's surname, not a grandmother's maiden name as some mistakenly believe. Colbert wasn't just shaping a name, she was crafting an entire persona. She famously refused to be filmed from her right side, convinced her left was more photogenic. She had a reputation for being meticulous, even strategic, about her career moves. When her Paramount contract ended in 1944, she didn't rush into another studio deal. Instead, she went freelance, an unusual move at the time that gave her control over her roles and salary. And it worked. Her performance in It Happened One Night won her an Academy Award in 1934, cementing her as one of the biggest stars of the Golden Age. But Hollywood had a way of deciding fates, no matter how carefully crafted an image was. In 1950, Colbert was set to play Margot Channing in All About Eve, a role that could have redefined her career. But a back injury forced her to drop out, and Bette Davis stepped in, delivering one of the most legendary performances in film history. Some wonder if Colbert ever regretted that moment, watching from the sidelines as Davis turned the film into an instant classic. Still, the name change worked. Claudette Colbert became a household name, synonymous with wit, charm, and intelligence. But her story is proof that in classic Hollywood, reinvention wasn't just an option, it was a necessity. Alan Ladd. Alan Ladd didn't need a new name, he built a new identity. Born Alan Walbridge Ladd in 1913, he kept his real name, but Hollywood executives weren't sold on him at first. Too short, too blonde, too ordinary, they said. He struggled, even taking odd jobs. But when This Gun for Hire hit theaters in 1942, everything changed. Ladd's icy stare and clipped delivery made him the blueprint for the brooding anti-hero. By the time Shane premiered in 1953, he was a household name. But behind that cool exterior, he battled deep insecurities and personal struggles. His tragic passing in 1964, ruled an accidental substance-related incident, only deepened the mystery around his carefully crafted image. Some whisper that his reinvention wasn't just about Hollywood expectations. It was his way of escaping a past he never wanted to return to. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.